The meadow was quiet for one breath too long. Then the earth split open. Black horses climbed through the flowers. A king from the underworld reached for a girl called Cori. By nightfall, the world would feel her mother's grief. This is the myth of Persephone, the Greek maiden who became a queen below. It is also the story of why spring returns and why the fields fall silent. A single flower begins it. A handful of seeds decides it. And behind every bright blossom waits a bargain with the dead. By the end, you'll see why this legend still feels alive. But first, the sunlit world has to break. Persephone was the daughter of Demeter, goddess of grain and harvest, and Zeus, king of the gods. To many Greeks, she was also Cora, which simply means the maiden, the young spring girl. She loved open meadows, fresh water, and the brief bright beauty of flowers before noon heat settled over the land. One day she walked with Oceanid nymphs, the daughters of the deep rivers, gathering roses, crocuses, and violets. Then she saw a narcissus unlike any flower on earth, bright as a lamp and strangely sweet. Ancient poets say the bloom was no accident, but a trap arranged by Zeus and the deep earth. Persephone reached for it, laughing, with both hands full of petals and no shadow on her heart. That was the instant the ground tore wide and daylight suddenly had a door leading downward. Up surged Hades, lord of the underworld, brother of Zeus, riding a golden chariot from the dark. He seized Persephone and drove her below before the field could even close around her cry. Her voice rose over mountains and sea, calling first for her father, then for her mother. Few heard her clearly, and fewer still dared answer, but the world had already begun to change. Demeter heard the echo like a wound, and all the sweetness of the earth turned bitter. She dropped her garlands, took up blazing torches, and began searching across land and shore. For 9 days and nights she wandered, neither eating ambrosia nor drinking nectar, only calling her daughter's name. No god came forward at first, and that silence made the loss feel even colder. At last Hecate, goddess of crossroads and night mysteries, approached with torchlight and a careful voice. Hecate had heard Persephone's cries, she said, but she had not seen who carried her away. So together they went to Helios, the sun god, because nothing under daylight escapes his gaze. Helios told Demeter what no mother wanted to hear. Hades had taken Persephone with Zeus's consent. The underworld king, Helios said, was not an unworthy husband by divine rank, but that was not comfort. Demeter heard only that her daughter had been given away without her voice, and fury replaced shock. She left Olympus at once, leaving the shining halls of the gods behind like a closed door. Disguised as an old woman, she wandered until her feet carried her to Eleusis, a town of princes. There she sat beside a well, dusty and silent, looking less like a goddess than grief itself. The daughters of King Silas found her there and offered kindness before they knew whom they served. They brought her home to their mother Metnaira, queen of the house, who asked the stranger to stay. Demeter agreed to nurse the infant prince Demophoon, and for a moment sorrow turned into purpose. She fed the child ambrosia, the food of gods, and held him as if healing her own heart. By night she placed him in the fire, not to harm him, but to burn away his mortality. The ritual might have made him deathless, a rare gift from a grieving goddess to a mortal home. But Metnaira walked in, saw the child within the flames, and cried out in terror. The spell broke at once, and Demeter rose in her full divine form, bright and terrible. Her beauty filled the hall like dawn, but so did her anger, and the household trembled. She ordered the people of Eleusis to build her a temple and altar beyond the city. They obeyed quickly, for even kings move fast when a hidden god reveals her face. Within that temple, Demeter sat apart from gods and mortals, still aching, still unwilling to forgive. She withheld her gift from the earth, and no seed answered the farmer's hand. Wheat failed in the furrows, orchards held still, and the color drained from human labor. Smoke rose from fewer altars, because starving people had little left to offer the immortals. Soon the crisis reached Olympus, where even the gods felt the absence of sacrifice and praise. Zeus sent Iris, the rainbow messenger, to call Demeter back, but the harvest goddess refused her. One by one other gods approached with promises, honors, and soft words, yet none could move her. Demeter gave one answer to all of them: no green blade would rise until Persephone returned. Zeus called for Hermes, the swift messenger god, guide of travelers and souls between worlds. Hermes descended to the underworld, where shadows drifted and Hades sat beside the stolen queen. Persephone was no longer only the meadow girl. Sorrow had already made her older and quieter. Hermes delivered Zeus's command: Persephone must go back above so the earth could live again. Hades did not rage, at least not openly, because even he understood the danger of endless famine. He spoke gently to Persephone then, promising that below she would rule as queen, not prisoner alone. He named the honor she would hold among the dead, but power is complicated when it arrives through loss. Then, before she left, he offered her pomegranate seeds, bright as garnets against the dim underworld air. In Greek myth, food eaten among the dead binds the living to that realm in lasting ways. Persephone tasted the seeds, whether from hunger, pressure, or a moment too late to undo. That small act changed everything, and the meadow could never simply become innocent again. When Persephone rose back to sunlight, Demeter ran to meet her like rain breaking a long drought. Mother and daughter embraced, and for one glorious instant, the whole earth seemed to breathe. Fields softened, buds swelled, and even the air felt lighter, as if spring recognized its queen. But Demeter looked closely, because joy in myth is often followed by one hard question. Had Persephone eaten anything below, anything at all, in the house of Hades? Persephone answered truthfully that she had tasted pomegranate seeds in the underworld. Demeter understood at once what that meant, and hope narrowed into a bargain instead of a rescue. Zeus settled the dispute with a compromise shaped by power, necessity, and the rules older than comfort. Persephone would spend part of every year with Hades beneath the earth, and the rest with Demeter above. In the famous ancient telling, that portion is 1/3 below and 2/3 under the open sky. So the myth explains a rhythm people knew by heart: growth, loss, waiting, and return. When Persephone rises, Demeter's joy moves through root and branch, and the world answers with flowers and grain. When Persephone descends, Demeter mourns again, and the land turns spare, hushed, and slow. Persephone does not return as the same girl who once ran carefree through the Narcissus field. She comes back changed, carrying both sunlight and underworld knowledge inside one divided life. That doubleness made her more than a victim in later Greek imagination. It made her mysterious and strong. Above, she is Cora, the maiden, the face of spring and tender green beginnings. Below, she is Persephone the queen, seated beside Hades, dignified among shades and ancient laws. The Greeks understood that life and death were not opposites so much as neighbors sharing one border. Seeds vanish underground before they rise, and winter sleep prepares the very spring that seems to defeat it. That is why this myth never feels like only a kidnapping story or only a weather story. It is also about a mother whose love can halt civilization because food itself depends on her favor. It is about a daughter crossing the line between youth and knowledge, innocence and responsibility, bloom and shadow. And it is about gods whose choices shape mortal lives, often without asking human hearts for permission. The story leaves its deepest human mark at Eleusis, where Demeter's grief became sacred memory for generations. There, the Eleusinian mysteries grew around Persephone's return, secret rites offering initiates hope beyond the grave. We do not know every ritual because those who entered the rites guarded their silence with unusual devotion. But ancient writers speak of Eleusis with reverence, as though the myth promised more than crops in spring. It promised that descent is not always the end, and darkness never owns the whole year. That may be why the legend still feels close whenever winter lingers and the first green pushes through. You see Persephone in the first branch budding, the first field brightening, the first mild wind over stone. Yet the myth refuses a perfect ending, and that refusal is part of its lasting power. Demeter gets her daughter back, but never completely. Persephone gains a throne, but loses part of the sunlit year. Hades gains a queen, but never full possession of the living spring he wanted beside him. No one wins cleanly, and the turning seasons become the visible record of that divine compromise. That bittersweet balance is deeply Greek, where beauty carries loss and joy already knows it cannot stay. The myth also understands something painfully human. Growing up can feel like crossing a border without consent. Returning home does not erase what happened there. It only teaches you to carry two worlds at once. So yes, this is the Greek myth behind the seasons. But the seasons here are emotional weather. Winter fields become a mother's grief, and spring light becomes a daughter's return, written across soil and sky. If these old legends still catch fire for you, there are more waiting just beyond this one. Greek gods, Norse giants, doomed heroes, and stranger creatures all gather around the next story's edge. Stay with the myths, and you'll start hearing ancient names inside storms, harvests, and falling leaves. A flower opened, a kingdom answered, and the earth has been remembering Persephone ever since.